Hello and welcome to Sports Talk. I'm Phil Hill, and this month our special guest is the former star and basketball coach for Rutgers University, Bob Wenzel. Bob, welcome to Sports Talk.
Thank you very much, Phil. It's a pleasure to be here. I know we were trying to do this during the season.
That's right.
And it was tough at that time, but now that the season's over, I'm glad to be with you.
Okay. First thing we got to talk about is what I think was a magnificent tournament, the NCAA's, and I know you were very involved with it. But let's talk a little bit about Arizona and Kentucky.
It was a wonderful game, I thought, and you know, we were talking off air about it a little bit. You know, I think going into it, a lot of the hype was, you know, Kentucky's press and Arizona being the underdog, and I think all of that sort of played out. Arizona handled the press beautifully with Mike Bibby and Miles Simon. But Kentucky, the way they press, they make everybody get involved. You know, they'll trap different people, and so the other players like Dickerson and Bramlett, they all had to come back and help out against the press. And I think not a lot of credit was given to Arizona's defense. I mean, they played remarkably well against Kansas and Carolina and Kentucky, and their field goal percentage defense was very low. So it was a terrific game to watch, and I loved the fact that it was overtime. I mean, it was very, very exciting.
I'll tell you, fast and fearless is the term that comes to Arizona. I tell you, Minnesota was my team. Minnesota was practically embarrassed the way they kept on turning the ball over.
Yeah.
And you sort of expected that Kentucky might do the same thing to Arizona. Of course, you're talking about young players here.
Yeah.
And Arizona they just handled them.
They did, and you know, Bibby is much older than his years. He's a very mature player. Even his body language when he plays, he's not overly enthusiastic to the point of taking him out of his own game. Miles Simon is a demonstrative type person, but a very composed player, very smart player. 2 years ago, we played Arizona, and Damon Santiago had a great game against them, had 29 points, and it was at Arizona where they rarely lose. And we were coming, and it was a one-point game with under a minute to go, and Miles Simon hit a three. I mean, he was cold. It was a dagger.
He's consistent.
It was a dagger. And I guess, you know, he was the high scorer in the NCAA tournament this year, and really had a spectacular tournament. And obviously, he was a big difference last night, too.
I'll tell you, Lute Olson, when you figure, I mean, he beat Kansas, North Carolina, and Kentucky. I mean, that's saying a whole lot.
Yeah, it
three
really
number
is.
ones.
Yes, 3 number ones, and that's not been done before, Phil. And you know, the thing about they beat the best team, which was Kansas.
Right.
And in the way college basketball goes, it's not a series of games like the NBA or the World Series. So truly, you don't get the champion. You know, it's not a true test because someone could be sick, somebody can get on a hot roll, and it's a wonder. And that's what makes it wonderful, also. But you know, with beating Kansas first, the next game against Carolina, they didn't really have to prepare any differently because Kansas and Carolina are mirror images of each other, and they do the exact same things, and I think that was an advantage for them in some ways. Then, of course, with Kentucky, in a final game like that, anything can happen. And I thought Pitino did an interesting job of making it seem like his team was an underdog with all those players on their team, and being a repeat, you know, trying to repeat, and he did an excellent job of preventing that from getting in their way.
Well, there are some names, you talk about Bibby and Simon. I think, again, I hate to go back to quickness, though. Quickness, which worked against the threes, wouldn't let the three-pointers get off, and quickness wouldn't let the press stop them neither. And,
exactly. And really, those two things were very important because Kentucky is known for both of those things, the press and shooting threes. But also what happened, I think, during the course of the game, Arizona was just faster to the ball. The ball was loose, they'd get there. You know, even several times when Kentucky stole the ball and tried to get layups, Arizona would steal it right back. They really they looked fresher to me. Kentucky looked a little bit worn out.
That is a strange thing. If you listen to the fan and some of the people this morning, what they're talking about is that the fact that Kentucky looked tired. Mercer, particularly, the young fellow who's going to skip to the pros, and of course they're beating up on him this morning, saying that he's not ready. But the fact that to get to a game like this and to be tired, the heavy legs?
Well, I think some of it is style. Kentucky presses full court, and that creates turnovers, and obviously they did a great job against Minnesota doing that. But it also wears on your body. It's more exhaustive to play that way. And if you don't have a lot of depth, and they do have depth, but maybe not as much, certainly not as talented as they were last year, that can bring a team down a little bit. And even though they had a day's rest in between games, they played a lot more games, too. Going into the Final Four, Arizona played the fewest games, 32. The other two teams played 34, and one played 38. So they played the fewest games, and maybe that had a little bit to do with it. And I think maybe their youth helped them. The younger the legs, the better. And sometimes.
And you just don't know. I mean, you got to remember, Arizona came in at the end of the season 19-9. Yeah. I mean, 19-9 is not bad, but they hadn't played great ball, so to speak. So they came in rather loose.
Yes, and I think they were 5th in their league, and they're 1st in the nation. Miles Simon did not play. There was a problem with him eligibility-wise. So in a number of those games, he did not play. And he came in later in the season. And that's not to say he's a bad student. I don't want to create that situation. It was sort of a mix-up in what class he took. It wasn't that this guy's a bad student, but he was not eligible for a while. And so I think getting him back added a boost. Sometimes you see that in the NBA where a guy's hurt for a while, and it'll be interesting to see if Shaquille O'Neal has this impact on the Lakers, where he's hurt for a while and then comes back at the end and gets involved in the playoffs. And I think that can be a boost, and I think it was a boost for Simon, obviously, with Arizona.
Where are we going with young players? I mean, to see a player like Bibby, a freshman, come in and the maturity he exhibited, and where are we going? I mean, I just read in the Philadelphia Inquirer where there are a couple high school players who are going to pull a Garnett. They're probably going to be drafted. They're probably going to be drafted, so they're not even going to get to college. How come players are so much better?
Well, a number of things. Tracy McGrady from Mount Zion is one of those players, and Lamar Odom from St. Thomas More in Connecticut, St. Thomas Aquinas in Connecticut. Those two players are probably going to be this year's contribution from high school to the NBA. There's 29 NBA teams. Willis Reed, who is one of my idols in basketball and a wonderful, wonderful guy who's with the Nets, of course, now. He was a second-round draft pick, but he was the 10th guy chosen. There was only 9 teams at the time in the NBA. So now there's 29, and when the NBA expanded and brought in the teams from Canada, there were 24 new jobs, 12 on each team. So they needed to dip into the college ranks. And players like Garnett, who you mentioned, and the 2 from Carolina, Stackhouse and Wallace, they still should be playing in college. And Marcus Camby should still be playing in college, in the sense of if this were 10 years ago and they continued to play through their eligibility. Now things have changed, and players play a lot more now. They play in the summertime. Their high school seasons, maybe they play 18 or 20 games. In the summer, maybe they play 40 or 50 games. I have 2 sons in East Brunswick who played for the St. Bart's traveling basketball team. They played about 45 games, and they're 11 and 12 years old. So I think that's part of the development of players. And of course, there's it's a little bit now with proper nutrition, and people are bigger and faster and stronger.
Yeah, but making the decision, we talked about Mercer a little bit for Kentucky, the fact that he's declared himself eligible for the NBA, and the biggest showcase that you can have in college, I won't say he disappeared, he had 18 points, I believe, but clearly didn't appear to be pro material at this time.
He didn't play well in that game, and had played well in the games leading to the final. As far as a catch-and-shoot guy, he can do that, which happens a lot for the 2 and 3 men. That's what he needs to be. He's a mid-sized player for the NBA, Jordan Pippen type player. He needs to do that. He needs to be able to put the ball on the floor and create his own shot or create a shot for someone else. I didn't see that.
Didn't do that at all.
No, didn't do that at all. Perhaps he can do that, and their system is not one which requires that. That's a possibility. but NBA teams looking at him certainly are going to question that. He'll have an opportunity to show his wares in the NBA pre-draft camp that exists in Chicago in June. What's happened now is a lot of the top guys, especially big people, but even guards with Iverson and Stephon Marbury being in the NBA now, who do you draft now? I mean, there might be guys that get drafted in the first round who don't make rosters right now. And but I think it's tough for you and I or anyone to criticize players. I mean, if you're a 19-year-old guy and somebody is going to give you $3 million over 3 years, that's hard to turn down.
Well, do you do like Rick Pitino did? Just state, listen, if you're coming to Kentucky, you got to give me at least 2 years. I mean, saying that alone is rather strange, but you got to give me at least 2 years.
He's in a position to do that. Not many coaches in college are. That program obviously attracts because of the history of the school and the huge success they've always had and the fan support and so forth that is there in Kentucky. Other people are not going to have players quite like that all the time, so I don't think it becomes a moot point for most colleges. We talk about it a lot, but really it affects very few compared to the entire population of college athletes, and a lot of time is spent on it because of the money generated, I think. And so it would be easy for him to say that. I think most coaches would not say that. They'd be happy to have a guy with those kinds of talents.
I see. You've had a rather unique perspective for this NCAA tournament, and I know since leaving Rutgers, you've talked about wanting to get into television, and you jumped right into television with CBS. Yeah. Tell us about that.
That was very interesting, and I had the opportunity to work for CBS in the studio, and I worked, the first day I worked was the SEC Championship and the Big 12 Championship games, and in the studio with Pat O'Brien and Clark Kellogg and Quinn Buckner, and Jim Nance took over on the days that O'Brien wasn't there, so I got a really opportunity to work with those people. And I didn't do a whole lot. They could have existed very well without me. But I gave them perspective on games, and then during the tournament, when a lot of games were going on at the same time, I had the opportunity to watch those games and stood next to O'Brien and with the analysts as well. And then when they came on the air, I would just step off, and he would say things like, what's happening in this game? And I would say, well, the Temple Zone is frustrating Mississippi. Okay. So he would lead with that when he came on camera, and they would go to each site. And so it was very interesting to see that, and it was a wonderful experience for me to have the opportunity to work with those people. And the fascinating thing that the public, I wish, could see is in a studio like that, it's as big as the East Brunswick Library, and there is the where the producers are in that room, the control room, and then another room. There must be hundreds of people working on a production. Behind the scenes activity is amazing. It's just fascinating to see, and we all come out and see this product that comes out on the air, and 5 seconds before Pat O'Brien or Nance comes on, it's hectic everywhere, and then the on-floor stage guy says, "Okay, 5, 4, 3," and boom, and they just step up. Yeah.
You clearly state that you want to get into television. I saw you on Comcast, by the way, which was a lot of fun. You don't mind being behind the scenes, or?
Well, I'm probably going to be doing games next year, and it looks like that's what's going to happen. And behind the scenes, I think obviously you have to pay your dues and try to learn the business as well as you can. But I'll be in front of the camera next year and doing games, and that's what I'm looking at right now.
So you've hooked on with something?
Yeah, there's some things that I can't really talk too much about in the public domain right now, but it looks like I'll be doing a lot of games next year, and college basketball analyst. And I think the analyst part obviously comes from a coach's viewpoint, your knowledge of the game. And what I've learned, however, by watching things is that the person who is the play-by-play man, or the host, if you will, that's the person who carries things. And they're the ones that I think really have to have the knowledge and the wherewithal in television things. The others, you know, it's just basically knowledge of basketball and knowledge of people in the game.
Okay, is this to say we're not going to see Bob Wenzel back in coaching?
Well, there's some things happening right now in that area as well, and so I think for me at this time, the best thing is to just keep as many irons in the fire, as they say, as possible, and see where things lead. And a lot of it has to do with our family and what we want to do in the future and so forth. And so we're looking at a couple of things right now, and the television is fun for me, and it's new, although I've had a show of my own on New Jersey Network and on Comcast over the years, so I know about that. And I think most people who have been in coaching or played professionally and so forth, they're used to being in front of a camera and understand how it works, and so that's something that I'm going to try to investigate fully.
Okay. I'm going to take advantage of you and talk a little bit about everything, NBA as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if a lot of people know that you had two assistant coaches who are now NBA coaches, Eddie Jordan with Sacramento and Jeff Van Gundy with the New York Knicks.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about each of them.
Well, you know, Eddie, as many people in this area know, was a wonderful, wonderful player for Rutgers. And when I came to Rutgers as the head coach from the Nets, he called me, and he was at Boston College and wanted to get back and help build the program here. So I hired Eddie, and then Jeff Van Gundy was a graduate assistant coach at Providence, and they had been fired there, and he was looking for a job, and I hired him. And Eddie stayed with me for about 4 or 5 years. Jeff stayed about 1.5 years. And when Stu Jackson became the coach of the Knicks, he hired Jeff back because he knew him from Providence. So both of them, we worked together and had good success at Rutgers with that group of coaches and players. And now it's wonderful to see them doing so well. Van Gundy, of course, with the Knicks, a great deal is expected of that franchise. Eddie just got the job. The way he got to Sacramento was when Gary St. Jean was hired as the coach of Sacramento, we worked together with the Nets, and I called to congratulate him on his job, and he said, listen, you know, I'm looking for a guy to fill out the staff, and I don't really know anybody, but I want it to be a former NBA player. I said, well, I've got a guy right here on my staff, Eddie Jordan. So they talked twice on the phone, and he hired him, which was a great break for Eddie. And now that Gary's been let go, Eddie's been given the reins out there. So he's working with that team right now, and hopefully he's going to have a lot of success.
Okay, super. What's Van Gundy's biggest strength?
I think he's got a lot of them. He relates well to players. He's a no-nonsense type of coach. He's very honest. He knows defense, and defense wins championships. You know, offense sells tickets, defense wins games. And he is a coach's son. His dad's a coach. His brother is a coach.
I see. So it's
so it's in his blood.
I see.
And he's a wonderful human being with very good values. And I think that he is in a very tough situation, being the coach of the New York Knicks. The pressure of that job is tremendous, and I see his eyes have some glare to them right now at this time of year. It's a long season, but they played very well against Orlando the other day, and I'm sure they're going to keep it together, and they're going to have a good run in the playoffs.
Okay. You live here in East Brunswick.
Yes.
How many years?
I've lived in East Brunswick since when we first came, which is 9 years, and we moved into the. As a matter of fact, I took my team, my Rutgers team, to Spain, and while I was in Spain, my wife bought the house, and we've lived there ever since.
Why East Brunswick?
Well, it was. I think the school system was very important for us. You know, we have 3 children, and we had 2 at the time, and you know, the 3 kids are getting a very quality education here. I think it's a good place to live in terms of the children, and the things that go on in East Brunswick are very good, and it's a good atmosphere, and it was close to the job, and you need, in the coaching profession, you need to be very close to where you work.
It would have been very easy for you to be the coach of the state university and too busy to bother, but I've seen you coaching Little League Baseball here in East Brunswick. Matter of fact, the All-Star team as well.
Yeah, I coached baseball, and that was an experience, and I certainly did not feel an expertise in that area, although I played and I coached baseball when I was at Yale University many years ago. And it was the young ones, and it was the coach pitches to the players, and with one player, I just tried to make sure I hit his bat, but it was a wonderful experience, and I was very cognizant of the parents in this situation. And you know how you hear some horror stories about parents and their children in sports, youth sports, and I gave every parent a job to do at the game, so that they were occupied doing things.
Busy, then they couldn't
exactly. So one kept score, one was in charge of the bats, one was in charge of the helmets, one was in charge of the crying kids, one was in charge to make sure no one hit someone else on the head with the bat. And it was a wonderful experience, and a lot of those kids who played on that team, I see them now. They're obviously much older now, and it's good to see them running around.
You gotta be. And let's talk about your kids. There's Alex, Michael, and Kelsey, I believe.
Yes, yes.
And Alex is
12.
12. Michael?
He's at Hammersholt, and Michael is 11. He's at Warnsdorfer, and Kelsey's 7, and she's at Warnsdorfer.
Okay, and then there's your wife, Neva.
Yes. Yes.
A unique name.
Yes, it is a unique name, and her father named her, and there is a river in Russia called the Neva River, but there was also an actress of some repute who I think her father enjoyed, and so I'm not exactly sure. One of those two places is where that name came from.
I see. We're not really not going to talk about Rutgers a whole lot, but Tommy Amaker recently picked up at Seton Hall as a coach. I think a surprise to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Great opportunity for him. What can you tell us?
Of course, I'm going to say positive things about Tommy because I coached at Duke for 6 years also as an assistant coach.
You coached at Duke?
Duke for 6 years.
Wow.
And we went to the national finals in 1978 there with Jaminski and Spanarkel, who's a New Jersey player. Spanarkel works now for Merrill Lynch and does the Nets games and some Big East games on television. So there's a natural sort of affinity to wish him well. And I left Duke and became a head coach, and he's done the same. And he's a wonderful guy, and I think he knows basketball very, very well. It's going to be a change for him because he's been the assistant and now he's going to be the head coach. So that 6-inch move from one seat to the next seat is really across a canyon.
Yeah.
And so there'll be new responsibilities for him. But he's a very bright guy. He knows basketball. He's a good people person. And I think he'll do a terrific job there.
Yeah. You're right, that little move over to head coach is a big difference. I think he's starting to feel some of it already. Today's paper pointed out Danny Hurley, who of course went to Seton Hall and of the Hurley family, rather disappointed that he wasn't selected as an assistant coach. And I mean, Tommy Amaker has a lot on his mind without having to worry about that.
Yeah.
But that's it's starting already for the responsibilities that come your way as a head coach.
Yes, and hiring staff is an important part of any coaching duties, and Tom is going to hire people that he knows, and it's his first job, and I'm sure that that's what he's thinking. It's unfortunate that media handles things certain ways sometimes. The story really should be about those two that he hired and their contribution rather than who he didn't hire.
Right.
So it's unfortunate that they play that up that way. And Danny Hurley is in a good situation right now. He's working for his dad at St. Anthony, and they have a terrific program, obviously. And he's going to get various opportunities as time goes on.
Okay. Tell me about, from your perspective, the quality of basketball in New Jersey as it compares to other states.
I think basketball, there's good basketball everywhere. I think in the Final Four this year, a great deal of attention was paid to the state of Indiana because that's where it was being played, and the great tradition of basketball that state has.
Right.
the Carolinas have always been very proud of their tradition of basketball with the Big Four: Duke, North Carolina State, and Wake Forest. The state of South Carolina has many, had 4 teams in the NCAA tournament this year, stocked with players from the state of South Carolina. Television has changed things a great deal. Players travel all over to go to colleges, and they go to different places in different states all the time, as do students. You know, the state of New Jersey, I read a study about this some time ago, that they send more students to other states to go to college than any state in the United States.
I believe it.
And this has nothing to do with athletics.
I see.
So it's an interesting, you know, there's plenty of good players in New Jersey. Obviously in New York there's plenty of good players. Connecticut has always had great players. I think the basketball is a national, international game right now, and with all of the television that people see the NBA overseas, they see it everywhere. I think there's good players everywhere.
Everywhere. We got to see an awful lot of good basketball. I was terribly impressed with the girls finals. Tennessee, just a super team. But some of the talent, Old Dominion, that was out there is just unbelievable. So basketball is international. A few girls from Portugal were on the Old Dominion team.
Yeah, they have players, and as you know, college basketball has players from all over. Wake Forest had this fellow Peral from Spain playing, and Clemson has several, and Carolina in the Final Four has one from Germany starting, Okalaja.
That's right.
And their center, Zwicker, is from the Netherlands. So it's phenomenal. When I was in Europe 2 summers ago, they get Big East basketball in countries in Europe.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a very interesting phenomena, and it's truly an international game. And obviously the NBA, I think, is experimenting with franchises. You know, Vancouver's pretty far away.
That's right.
And they're talking about what they're going to do about Europe. And of course, what they've done is take the best European players, and they're playing in the NBA now.
That's for sure.
So it's an interesting phenomena, and there's good players everywhere now.
Okay. Bob, we're about out of time, but before we go, I'd like to say a few things. I'm reading the newspaper and the response of the people in Central Jersey and New Jersey talking about what you did bring to Rutgers University in the way of class, the dignity, and how you've handled yourself and kept a clean program. I mean, there are things to look for. I think you're going to be missed. I think you're going to be missed more than people really realize. You're a class act, and you're certainly a tribute to East Brunswick and Central Jersey. And I just want to say that personally from me, and wish you the best of luck in whatever you do.
Well, thank you very much, Phil.
Okay.
You're a gentleman to say that, and I appreciate it.
Okay.
A great deal. Thank you.
Okay. For Bob Wenzel, I'm Phil Hill saying join us next time.